Hello and welcome to this presentation about census and demographic data. This presentation is in the context of VCE Computing, Units 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and my name is Mr. O'Mara and I'm a teacher of those subjects. So let's have a look at what we're doing today. So our learning intention is that students can explain what census and demographic means about the population. So democracy is the rule of the population, demographic information about the population, how old people are, where they live, what they do, where they were born, that sort of thing, and what the strengths and weaknesses of this data is. So we'd start off by asking what you already know about the census if you're in class with me. So let's see what there is to know about the Australian census. It is mandatory for all Australians, so you are required by law to do it, and the ABS actually puts quite a lot of effort into going back and collecting censuses from people who don't do it online. You know, there was a bit of a brouhaha when they had large-scale people doing it online, that some people struggled, but despite the media reporting, there was in fact a very high level of completion online and a very high level of completion on the night, which is not to say that it couldn't have been better, and there's some lessons about software development in that too. It's conducted by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. They actually employ quite a large number of field workers every 5 years to go out and do this. It covers the entire national population. This is not to say that there aren't people who slip through. So the first and the third point there, yes, it applies to all people. As we'll come to, there are people, Indigenous communities, some migrant communities, some socio-economic groups are harder to reach than others. The rate of completion is about 95%. So it's not 100%, and that does mean that there is a kind of asterisk next to the validity of it, but 95% is a huge subset of the total population. And it has a pretty comprehensive demographic data. It collects a lot of information, and it gives you really specific detailed insights, as we can see in one of our field trips. So, the strengths of census data is that it's highly reliable. You know, they have literal official statisticians who go through and work out how this stuff is collected. It's not just like you or I doing a survey on Google Forms or Microsoft Forms. There is a lot of work done to handling it in a robust fashion, so it is data that you can rely on. It is comprehensively around the entire country. It's statistically robust, so you know, even though you're only talking about 19 out of 20 people, you can make some extremely accurate assessments using the data out of 19 out of 20 people. I think this is actually one of the absolute best things about it, is that it's free and publicly available. This is not just data that is available to government. This is data that is available to individuals, to teachers, to students, to business people, to community groups, so that you as a citizen of this country or as a resident of this country can actually make decisions based on what the real data is. That if you want to open a childcare centre, you can look and say, well, this is how many births there's been in this area. If you're running a school, you can look and see what the educational attainment is. You can see what people's income is, not down to an individual level, but you can actually make very informed decisions. And some people are like, oh, well, I don't want to pay taxes. I don't want to have the government providing things. They don't do anything for me. Well, one of the differences between a developed country where we have this fantastic infrastructure and countries that don't have this infrastructure for various reasons, is that it actually props up all sorts of decision making that we can do based on actual real world data, rather than just having to kind of intuit what might be true and what might not be true. And while I'm on a bit of a rant, I think there's a kind of misguided tendency to think that, you know, nothing is knowable. Nobody really knows how many people live here. No decisions are actually made on facts. Just one opinion is as good as the other. But the ABS is actually putting out data which is, you know, pretty accurate, pretty recent, and pretty statistically valid. You know, things are knowable. Are they perfect? No. Are they good enough? Well and truly good enough. So that's the end of that rant. And they provide very granular detail, as we'll see. And they're done every 5 years. You know what, that's not as up to date as it could be, but it's an expensive enterprise. And places like the United States are even now talking about not doing their census. They're just doing stuff from other methods. And it covers diverse population segments, although it has to be said there are there are weaknesses in it, and it's scientifically valid. What are the limitations in using census data? Well, it can become outdated very quickly. If you're looking at employment data, a lot can change in the space of 6 months or a year, much less 5 years. You know, what it told you at the last census isn't necessarily true now. Very little real-time information. The ABS does collect more up-to-date information. I used to think that the ABS just did the census, but in actual fact they run all sorts of, farming and employment and you name it, surveys. And this is available to the public too. There's actually quite a lot of information, but not the whole of population stuff from Census. But if you go to the ABS website, there's lots of up-to-date information there. The aggregated data may lack specificity. So, yeah, you can tell what's in general true, but you can't go right down and say, well, what's the exact intersection of this and this? And that's largely for privacy reasons. And sometimes the categories are very broad and you might want them to be more specific. And there are potentially some cultural representation limitations. You do have people who are just distrustful of the government, who deliberately lie to the government, who don't want to give information. They may come from places with repressive regimes. They may have an experience of unpleasant interactions with the government. They will withhold their data because they don't feel safe. And certainly if you look at the international scene, you can see where particular groups might be loath to tell the government too much about them, because sometimes government does behave improperly, and sometimes they don't want individuals having information about their group, not just a fear of government. So it's not perfect in that sense. So let's do 3 field trips for this one. So the first one is to the ABS Data Explorer. So I'm going to have a look here at people, at births. For my region, I'm going to go for Victoria because that's where I am. And the one I was really interested in was by nuptiality, whether you'd been married or not. So when we go through, here is a table of data from 2000, 2021, 22, 23 and 24. So this wouldn't be census data. This would have come from another source. It probably actually says where it comes from. And there you go. We've got the total data. We've got people who are not married, people who are not married with the paternity acknowledged, paternity not acknowledged, and people who are married. And the thing that I think is absolutely amazing about this is if you look up here, it says Developer API, and you can actually get the API for this. And so I did. I grabbed it and I built this page, or more to the point, I got AI to build this page for me. So there is all of that data. And I didn't have to copy and paste it in or anything. It's actually taking it off the website and it's mapping that data for me so that I can actually analyse it in the way that I want. I find this slightly more readable than the tables. And look, the average age, median age by marital status, between those who never married and those who are previously married. So those who are previously married, interestingly, so this is people who are married for the first time, they tend to be older than people who are marrying for the second time. Isn't that strange? So people who I guess are getting married earlier seem to be more likely to remarry. The age difference between partners is about 4.5 years. The men tend to be older. The median age of the groom is, there we go, 32. It's rising. The median age of the bride is rising. And unsurprising, the median age in general for when they get married is rising. So there you go. That's, I think, really interesting. Now, so that's stops 1 and 2. Stop 3 is this site called Informed Decisions, which I think is really interesting. You do need to sign up for this one, which I've already done. It doesn't cost anything, but it's a thing. So this is done by local government area. So I'm just going to look for Geelong, since that's where I live. And this time I'll look at the same category I did last time. So let's have a look at the economic profile. So that actually tells me some headlines that the gross product is $21 billion, which represents 3.53 of the state's gross product. It's actually not as much as I would have thought. What the population is, but you can get into really specific information. You can actually say what is, for instance, the value of exports. So there we go. So that's the value of exports across different years. And you can go through, say, manufacturing, for instance, the city of Greater Geelong and Victoria and so forth. So there's lots of really specific information there, even though logging in can be a bit painful. So let's finish up by saying what we know. So these statements, are they true or false? The Australian census is conducted every 5 years and provides the most comprehensive snapshot of the Australian population available to researchers and policymakers. Well, that's completely true. It's a bit of a gimme, that one. One major weakness of census data is that it becomes outdated quickly, particularly for fast-changing demographic values such as employment status or migration patterns. I would actually argue that migration patterns don't change all that often, but either way, the question stands, and that's true. It can become outdated. Some of these things change very quickly. Administrative data sources such as tax records and Medicare records can be used to supplement census data and provide more frequent updates. Yeah, that's true. They do use all sorts of data that's automatically collected these days. Census data in Australia is completely voluntary, and individuals who do not complete the census face no consequences, which can result in significant non-response bias. That's false. There are legal consequences for non-compliance or non-completion. However, some people still don't respond, and it can affect the data quality, although the rate of response is very high. I believe it's about 95%. The Australian census collects information on all residents, including those without stable housing, making it a perfectly representative data set with no coverage gaps. So that is false. They do try and collect information from remote communities, from the unhomed or the unhoused, but they're not all that successful, or they're not as successful as they could be. It is not perfect. There are still gaps. Like, it's good data, but there's no perfect data of this sort. And let's say demographic surveys conducted between census years can provide timely information on emerging population trends, but are generally less reliable than census data because they use smaller sample sizes. That's actually completely true. I used to think that the ABS just did the census. They actually collect all sorts of data, but they don't sample absolutely everybody. They are sampling rather than getting all of the data. Sample meaning you make a decision based on a subset of data. And I think that's the end of that presentation. So sorry about the stumbles along the way, but I hope that proved to be some kind of useful to you.